Greetings, dear souls. As you join me in this sacred space of reflection, I invite you to take a deep breath. Feel the air filling your lungs, nourishing every cell of your being, connecting you to the universal life force that flows through all things. Today, we embark on a journey beyond the veil of physical existence, exploring truths that have been hidden from common understanding, not by intent, but by the limitations of our human perception. The transition we call death has been cloaked in fear and misunderstanding for centuries, particularly when we contemplate the passing of our elders, those whose bodies have weathered many seasons on this earthly plane. We often hold preconceptions about their soul's journey that may not align with the deeper truths of cosmic existence. What I will share today may challenge what you've been taught, what you've believed, and perhaps even what you've feared. Before we proceed, I invite you to affirm your spiritual alignment with this exploration. If you are ready to receive insights about the true nature of the soul's journey after physical transition, especially for those who have accumulated decades of wisdom, please write in the comments, "I am open to the eternal wisdom of the soul's true path." This declaration of openness creates an energetic channel through which higher understanding can flow. Many of you have come to this conversation carrying the weight of grief, the burden of uncertainty about where your beloved elders have gone. Others come with curiosity about your own inevitable transition when your physical body has completed its purpose. Whatever brings you here, know that understanding death is ultimately about understanding life more fully. Contrary to prevailing beliefs, whether religious, scientific, or cultural, the soul of an elderly person does not simply ascend to a generalized heaven, nor does it cease to exist as materialism suggests. The truth that has emerged through countless readings, through the whispers of the Akashic records, and now through scientific investigations into consciousness, reveals a far more intricate and beautiful design. When an elderly person transitions from physical form, their soul carries with it not just the experiences of the most recent lifetime, but the crystallized wisdom accumulated through many incarnations. Unlike younger souls who depart suddenly, often with unfinished business and emotional attachments that can temporarily anchor them closer to the earth plane, elderly souls who have processed their life experiences often transition with greater awareness and intention. What modern science is beginning to recognize through studies in quantum consciousness, biocentrism, and non-local awareness is that consciousness itself does not emerge from the brain but rather flows through it. The brain functions more as a receiver than a producer of consciousness. This profound shift in understanding aligns with what the ancient wisdom traditions have taught for millennia and what my own readings have consistently revealed. When an elderly person's physical body deteriorates to the point where it can no longer sustain consciousness in the material realm, that consciousness does not disappear, it transforms. The electromagnetic energy field that interpenetrates and surrounds the physical body, what many traditions call the aura or subtle body, detaches from the dense physical form and carries with it the essential pattern of the individual's identity, including memories, personality, and accumulated wisdom. What happens next has been grossly oversimplified in most religious teachings. There is no single destination for all souls, no one-size-fits-all heaven or purgatory. Instead, the elderly soul enters what might be best described as a vibrational sorting, a natural process where consciousness gravitates toward realms that match its own frequency and level of development. For many elderly souls who have lived consciously with awareness and love, this transition includes a period of review, not judgment in the punitive sense, but rather a compassionate assessment of the life experience. During this review, which has been reported in countless near-death experiences and through deep spiritual readings, the soul perceives the totality of its actions, choices, motivations, and their effects on others. This is experienced not as punishment but as profound learning. What science is now detecting, through research into persistent consciousness after clinical death and non-local memory, is that this process involves coherent information processing that appears to continue even when brain activity has ceased. Researchers at institutions studying consciousness beyond the brain have documented cases where verifiable information unknown to the patient was acquired during periods of complete brain inactivity, suggesting consciousness operates beyond the confines of our neural networks. Now, here is where the truth diverges dramatically from conventional understanding. The elderly soul, particularly one that has achieved significant spiritual development during its earthly sojourn, does not simply rest in an eternal paradise. Rather, these souls often take on roles as guides, teachers, and healers in the spiritual realms. They become part of what some traditions call the cloud of witnesses, advanced consciousness that assists both incarnate souls on earth and those newly transitioned to spiritual planes. Many religions have sensed this truth and expressed it through concepts like sainthood, ancestor veneration, or angelic presence. What they've glimpsed is the reality that evolved souls continue to serve as active participants in the cosmic plan, not passive residents of an eternal resting place. The electromagnetic imprint of these souls, what quantum physicists might describe as information patterns in the zero-point field, maintains coherence and identity while expanding beyond the limitations imposed by physical form. This explains why sensitive individuals can sometimes perceive the presence or guidance of deceased loved ones. They are detecting actual patterns of consciousness that persist in non-local reality. What's particularly fascinating about elderly souls is that they often transition with a level of spiritual preparation that younger souls may not have achieved. When death comes as the natural culmination of a long life journey rather than an unexpected interruption, the soul has often already begun the process of expansion beyond the physical form. Many elderly people report heightened spiritual awareness, visitations from deceased loved ones, and a sense of readiness in their final days. These are not hallucinations, as conventional medicine might suggest, but rather the beginning stages of the consciousness shift that will fully activate at the moment of transition. Scientific studies into end-of-life experiences are now documenting these phenomena with increasing frequency, finding coherent patterns that transcend cultural and religious differences. Terminal lucidity, where severely cognitively impaired patients experience a mysterious return to clarity shortly before death, hints at the soul's independence from brain function. Similarly, shared death experiences, where healthy individuals present at a death temporarily perceive the same transcendent realities as the dying person, suggest these transitions open perceivable gateways between dimensions of existence. The most profound misconception regarding elderly souls relates to their continued relationship with those still incarnate on Earth. Far from being distant or inaccessible, these souls often maintain loving connections with family members and can, under the right conditions, offer guidance, comfort, and even protection. The veil between their realm of existence and our own is more permeable than we've been led to believe. Dreams provide one of the most common channels for communication, as during sleep our conscious mind's filters are relaxed, allowing subtler perceptions to reach our awareness. Many people report vivid, meaningful dreams of deceased elderly loved ones that carry specific messages or provide comfort during difficult times. These are not merely psychological projections but genuine interactions across dimensional boundaries. What modern grief research is now confirming is that these continued bonds with deceased loved ones can be psychologically healthy and spiritually nourishing, contrary to older models of grief that emphasized letting go and moving on. The ancient wisdom traditions have always recognized that love transcends physical death, creating enduring connections between souls, regardless of which plane of existence they currently inhabit. Another critical misunderstanding concerns the purpose of the life review process that elderly souls undergo after transition. This is not, as some religious traditions have taught, a judgment to determine reward or punishment. Rather, it is a compassionate integration of the soul's experiences for the purpose of continued growth and preparation for future service, whether that service will occur in spiritual realms or through subsequent incarnation. During my years of offering readings in the sleep state, I witnessed countless souls moving through this process. What became clear is that we are our own most honest assessors. When freed from the ego's defenses and the brain's limiting filters, the soul perceives with perfect clarity how it has loved, where it has faltered, and what remains to be learned. This creates not condemnation but compassionate understanding and renewed purpose. The scientific community is gradually acknowledging this process through research into near-death experiences, which consistently reveal a non-judgmental life review as a core element of the experience across cultures. What's particularly striking is that this review often unfolds from multiple perspectives simultaneously, allowing the soul to experience not only its own intentions but also the effects of its actions on others. For elderly souls who have accumulated decades of relationships, choices, and impacts, this review process can be extraordinarily rich and complex. Yet it unfolds with a clarity and efficiency that transcends the limitations of time as we understand it in physical reality. What might require years of therapy or self-reflection in earthly life can be integrated in what would appear to our perception as moments, though the soul experiences it as perfectly complete. What happens after this integration process is where scientific understanding is just beginning to catch up with spiritual insight. Advanced elderly souls who have achieved significant development over many lifetimes often enter what might be called specialized areas of service. Some become what various traditions have named spirit guides, guardian angels, or ancestral helpers, beings who assist incarnate souls facing challenges similar to those they themselves mastered. Others join what could be described as cosmic healing teams, collectives of advanced consciousness that work to repair energetic damage in individuals or geographical locations. The reports from hospice workers of dying elderly patients who express the need to help others on the other side aren't delusions, but often represent genuine precognitive awareness of the soul's upcoming service. Scientific researchers studying after-death communications and mediumship have documented striking cases where deceased individuals provide specific, verifiable information unknown to the medium or sitters, information that later proves accurate. This suggests that these communications originate from coherent consciousness that maintains both identity and access to knowledge after physical death. What's particularly remarkable about elderly souls is that they often continue to evolve and develop after transition. The wisdom accumulated through a long physical life provides a robust foundation for accelerated growth once freed from the limitations of the aging brain and body. Far from being a static, unchanging existence, the afterlife for these souls involves continued learning, service, and expansion. Some of these souls eventually choose to reincarnate, bringing their accumulated wisdom back into physical form to serve in new ways. Others remain in non-physical realms for extended periods, serving as teachers and guides. The choice depends on both individual soul purpose and collective need, for there is a cosmic intelligence that orchestrates these movements for the greatest growth of all. The scientific understanding of consciousness as potentially fundamental rather than emergent, a perspective gaining traction in quantum physics and consciousness studies, creates space for these continuities that traditional materialist models cannot accommodate. If consciousness is indeed a basic feature of reality rather than merely a product of brain activity, its persistence beyond physical death becomes not just possible but logical. For those of you watching who have lost elderly loved ones, understanding this larger picture can transform grief. Your beloved has not ceased to exist, nor are they suspended in a static paradise, removed from your life and concerns. They have transitioned to a different expression of consciousness, one that may well include continued awareness of and participation in your journey. The symbolic appearances of butterflies, meaningful coincidences, dreams, and intuitive knowings that so many report after losing an elderly loved one are not merely psychological comfort mechanisms, though they certainly provide comfort. They often represent genuine contacts across the apparent boundary between worlds. Science is now documenting these experiences systematically, finding patterns that suggest they represent more than wishful thinking. One of the most common misunderstandings about elderly souls after transition relates to time. In the non-physical realms, time as we experience it does not exist in the same linear fashion. An elderly soul may be able to perceive past, present, and future events simultaneously, which explains why communications from these souls sometimes include precognitive elements, information about events that haven't yet occurred in our timeline. Quantum physics has already established the fluid and observer-dependent nature of time, with experiments demonstrating that particles can affect each other instantaneously across any distance and that observation itself shapes reality. These findings create scientific space for understanding how consciousness might operate beyond our conventional time constraints after physical death. Another revelation that contradicts conventional understanding concerns the relationship between the elderly soul and its former physical body. While many traditions teach complete separation at death, the energetic connection can persist for some time, particularly if the transition was sudden or if strong emotional attachments remain. This explains why some souls may communicate a continued awareness of funeral proceedings or the disposition of their remains, often to the astonishment of surviving family members. Hospice workers and death duelists have documented countless cases where dying elders accurately perceive deceased relatives coming to assist them in the transition process, often describing in detail individuals they could not have known about through normal means. These are not hallucinations but glimpses of the welcoming committee of souls who assist in the transition process, often elderly souls themselves who have mastered the journey and now serve others navigating the same passage. What happens to the memories, the lived experiences, and the personality of the elderly person after death? This question troubles many who fear that all that made their loved one unique might somehow dissolve into a generic spiritual existence. The truth is both reassuring and profound. The essential identity, including key memories, personality traits, and emotional connections, remains intact while simultaneously expanding beyond previous limitations. It's perhaps most accurate to say that after transition, an elderly soul becomes more authentically itself, freed from the distortions sometimes imposed by physical illness, brain changes, or societal conditioning. Family members often report that communications from their transitioned elders reflect the essence of their personality, their humor, wisdom, and characteristic expressions, but without the limitations or negative patterns they might have struggled with in life. Scientific studies of mediumship have noted this consistency of personality evidence as one of the most compelling aspects of purported communications from the deceased. The statistical likelihood of mediums accurately capturing specific personality traits, memories, and communication styles without prior knowledge suggests continued coherence of identity beyond physical death. For the elderly soul itself, the experience after transition often includes a profound remembering, not just of the most recent life but of the soul's larger journey across many incarnations. This expanded awareness brings context and meaning to the experiences, challenges, and relationships of the just completed life. What might have seemed like random suffering or coincidence is perceived within a larger pattern of soul development. This remembering extends to soul groups, collections of beings who have incarnated together repeatedly to assist in each other's development. Many elderly souls discover upon transition that the strange sense of immediate recognition they felt with certain individuals during life reflected deeper soul connections spanning many lifetimes and multiple relationship configurations. Scientific research into children who remember previous lives has documented thousands of cases where young children provide verifiable details about deceased individuals they could not have known through normal means. When these cases involve the previous life of an elderly person, they offer compelling evidence for the continuity of specific memories and identity beyond a single lifetime. What about the relationship between elderly souls after transition and the divine source, what many traditions call God? Far from the anthropomorphic judge depicted in some religious teachings, elderly souls typically report encountering a presence of unconditional love and acceptance, a recognition of shared essence rather than an external authority. This presence is often described as both intensely personal, knowing the soul completely, and cosmic in scale. Neuroscientists studying mystical experiences, whether induced through meditation, sacred plants, or spontaneous awakenings, have documented consistent patterns of brain activity associated with perceptions of unity, transcendence of time and space, and encounters with boundless love. These same patterns appear in the reports of those who have had near-death experiences, suggesting a shared perceptual reality that transcends cultural programming. For elderly souls who practiced some form of spiritual discipline during life, the transition often includes a deepening of that practice and understanding. A lifetime of prayer, meditation, service, or contemplation creates channels in consciousness that remain active and expand after physical death. The devoted practitioner finds themselves more fully embodying the truths they glimpsed during earthly practice. Those who lived without explicit spiritual practice but who cultivated compassion, wisdom, and love through their actions discover that they have been spiritual practitioners all along. For the essence of spirituality is not dogma or ritual but the expansion of love and consciousness. Many are surprised to find that their simple acts of kindness carried more spiritual significance than elaborate ceremonies performed without heart engagement. The elderly who transition with unresolved emotional burdens, regrets, resentments, guilt, or unexamined shadow aspects, typically move through a healing process that allows integration of these elements. Unlike religious concepts of purgatory as punishment, this process is fundamentally therapeutic, designed to restore wholeness rather than inflict suffering. Advanced souls often assist in this healing work, creating safe space for emotional completion. Scientific studies of psychedelic-assisted therapy have shown that when the ego's defenses are temporarily relaxed, emotional processing that might take years can unfold rapidly and lead to lasting resolution. The transition at death appears to offer a similar opportunity for accelerated healing, particularly for elderly souls whose life experience has already brought them to the threshold of such integration. One of the most controversial aspects of the soul's journey concerns reincarnation, the return of the soul to physical form for continued growth and service. While some religious traditions reject this concept, It appears consistently in mystical branches of all major faiths and is directly taught in many wisdom traditions. The evidence from my readings, alongside systematic research into children's past life memories, suggests that reincarnation is a genuine aspect of soul development. For elderly souls, the choice to reincarnate typically comes after a period of integration and service in non-physical realms. When they do choose to return, they often do so with specific intentions related to their ongoing soul development or to assist in collective evolution. This explains why certain children display remarkable talents, spiritual awareness, or wisdom beyond their years. They are drawing on capacities developed across many lifetimes. Scientists studying child prodigies, young children who display mastery of complex skills with minimal training, have struggled to explain these phenomena through genetics or early learning alone. The continuity of consciousness across lifetimes offers a more comprehensive explanation for these otherwise puzzling cases of advanced ability in young children. What about elderly souls who lived difficult lives, perhaps causing harm to others through abuse, neglect, or destructive choices? Contrary to simplistic notions of eternal punishment, these souls typically encounter their impact through the life review process with a clarity that generates profound remorse and desire for healing and restitution. This natural consequence, seeing truly and feeling deeply the effects of one's actions, initiates transformation more effectively than imposed punishment ever could. Research into restorative justice has shown that when offenders directly encounter the impact of their actions on victims, genuine remorse and behavior change are far more likely than through punitive measures alone. The life review process appears to function as a cosmic restorative justice system, where truth is fully perceived and healing becomes possible for all involved. For those souls who remain resistant to this truth, who cling to distortions and justifications even after physical death, progression may be temporarily slower, but eternal condemnation is not part of the cosmic design. There are specialized healing environments and advanced souls dedicated to assisting those who struggle with the weight of their actions until they are ready to perceive truth and begin healing. The relationship between elderly souls after transition and the physical environments they once inhabited presents another fascinating dimension of this journey. Many indigenous traditions maintain that ancestral souls remain connected to specific landscapes, continuing to guard and guide the living who dwell there. The scientific study of place attachment and ancestral memory is beginning to provide frameworks for understanding these enduring connections. Elderly souls who felt deep connection to particular places, a family home, a cherished garden, a village or landscape, often maintain energetic ties to these locations after transition. Sensitive individuals may perceive their presence in these places, and meaningful coincidences or protective interventions may occur, particularly at moments of danger or significant transition for those still living. The phenomenon of deathbed visions, where dying individuals describe seeing deceased loved ones who have come to assist their transition, has been documented across cultures and throughout history. What's particularly striking is that these visions often include precise details about individuals the dying person could not have known through normal means, suggesting genuine perception rather than hallucination. For example, a dying grandmother might accurately describe her long-deceased mother-in-law whom she never met in life, including specific clothing or objects associated with that person. These corroborated details, reported by medical staff and family members, suggest an actual encounter rather than a psychological projection. What about elderly souls who suffered from dementia, Alzheimer's disease, or other cognitive impairments before death? The consistent evidence from spiritual readings and near-death accounts indicates that these conditions affect the brain's ability to express consciousness but do not damage the soul itself. Upon transition, these individuals typically experience a profound restoration of clarity, wholeness, and identity, often to the amazement and joy of those who receive communications from them after their passing. Neurological research has documented cases of terminal lucidity, where severely cognitively impaired patients experience brief but striking returns to mental clarity shortly before death. These cases suggest that consciousness remains intact even when the brain can no longer consistently express it, a finding that aligns with the understanding that consciousness does not depend entirely on brain function. The elderly soul's relationship with time after transition represents another departure from conventional understanding. While earthly consciousness perceives time as linear, flowing from past to present to future, transition souls typically experience what might be called simultaneous time or the eternal now. From this perspective, all incarnations exist concurrently, and the soul can access any point in this continuum. Quantum physics offers intriguing parallels through the concept of quantum superposition, the principle that particles exist in all possible states simultaneously until observed. If consciousness operates according to quantum rather than classical principles, it might similarly exist in multiple states and times simultaneously, only appearing localized and sequential during physical incarnation. The communication between transitioned elderly souls and those still in physical form often reflects this different relationship with time. Messages may seem to leap ahead of linear time, addressing situations that haven't yet manifested physically but exist as probabilities in the soul's broader perception. This expanded awareness explains the prophetic element in some after-death communications and in guidance received through prayer, meditation, or intuitive listening. For the family members and loved ones of transitioned elders, understanding these truths can transform the grief process from one of perceived separation and loss to one of relationship transformation and continued connection. The physical form and mode of communication have changed, but the essence of the relationship, the love, the knowing, the unique connection, continues across the apparent boundary between worlds. Many who have consciously opened to this continued relationship report profound healing, guidance, and comfort. Dreams, synchronicities, symbolic appearances, sense presence, and inner knowing represent different channels through which this ongoing connection may be experienced. Rather than pathologizing these experiences as grief hallucinations, contemporary psychology is increasingly recognizing them as potentially healthy aspects of continuing bonds. The scientific study of after-death communications has documented thousands of cases where bereaved individuals report specific, evidential contacts from deceased loved ones. These often include information unknown to the bereaved that later proves accurate, distinctive personality traits of the deceased, and physical effects difficult to explain through conventional means, suggesting these experiences represent more than wishful thinking or psychological projection. What about the elderly soul's continued growth and development after transition? Far from being a static, unchanging existence, the afterlife for these souls involves continued learning, service, and expansion of consciousness. Many report through mediumistic communications that they are engaged in study, creative expression, healing work, guidance of incarnate souls, earth stewardship, or preparation for future service either in spiritual realms or through reincarnation. The concept of the heavenly classroom appears across many wisdom traditions. The understanding that souls continue to learn and develop after physical death, often in communities of like-minded beings under the guidance of more advanced souls. These learning environments are not abstract or conceptual but experiential and immediately practical, focused on the application of wisdom rather than merely its accumulation. For elderly souls who cultivated specific passions, skills, or areas of service during their earthly lives, these often continue and expand after transition. The musician finds herself able to perceive and create harmonies impossible within the limitations of physical instruments. The healer discovers new modalities that work directly with energy and consciousness. The teacher finds students whose readiness precisely matches what he has to offer. This continued unfolding of purpose and vocation explains why communications from transitioned elderly souls often convey a sense of joy, engagement, and meaning rather than the passive rest depicted in conventional descriptions of heaven. These souls are not merely waiting for some distant judgment day or reunion. They are actively participating in the cosmic plan according to their unique capacities and callings. The relationship between elderly souls after transition and those approaching their own transitions presents another fascinating dimension of this journey. Many hospice workers report that their dying patients describe seeing and speaking with deceased loved ones who have come to assist them with the transition process. These are not hallucinations but genuine perceptions of souls who have mastered the death process and now return to guide others through it with compassion and wisdom. These transition guides, often elderly souls themselves, appear to have specialized understanding of the process of consciousness transfer from physical to non-physical existence. They know how to ease fear, provide reassurance, and create energetic conditions that facilitate a smooth transition. Their presence explains why many dying individuals show a sudden calm and readiness in their final hours, often after periods of struggle or resistance. What about elderly souls who died with unfinished business, unresolved relationships, unfulfilled dreams, or uncompleted purposes? These souls often seek channels to complete what was left undone, whether through communication with the living, by inspiring others to carry forward their work, or by creating conditions for resolution of relationship difficulties they left behind. The phenomenon of synchronicities, meaningful coincidences that defy statistical probability, often represents the influence of transition souls creating connections and opportunities for completion that couldn't occur during their physical lives. The estranged child who feels suddenly compelled to visit the parent's grave and finds unexpected healing there may be responding to subtle outreach from the transitioned soul seeking reconciliation. Scientific research into consciousness-related anomalies has documented numerous cases where physical systems, electronics, lighting, mechanical objects appear to be influenced by strong emotion or intentionality. These mind-matter interactions suggest mechanisms through which disembodied consciousness might create physical effects to communicate or complete unfinished business in the material world. The elderly soul's relationship with collective human evolution represents yet another dimension of this journey. Many wisdom traditions teach that advanced souls continue to serve as stewards of planetary evolution, helping to guide the overall development of human consciousness according to divine planning. These souls, sometimes called the Great White Brotherhood, Ascended Masters, or the Communion of Saints in different traditions, maintain a compassionate connection with humanity's struggles and triumphs. Contemporary near-death experiences sometimes include encounters with these advanced beings, who are described as emanating unconditional love while simultaneously holding cosmic perspective. Their guidance focuses not on controlling human choices, but on creating conditions where higher awareness can emerge through humanity's own developmental process. For elderly souls newly transitioned to non-physical realms, the opportunity to join these evolutionary guides, perhaps in humble apprenticeship at first, represents one potential path of service. This explains why some dying elders report being called to important work, or speak of helping from the other side in their final communications. They are perceiving genuine invitations to participate in the guidance of collective human development. What about the relationship between transitioned elderly souls and the angelic realms described in many traditions? The evidence from spiritual readings and near-death experiences suggests that souls and angels represent different streams of consciousness within the cosmic ecology. Angels appear to be beings who have not experienced physical incarnation but who serve as guardians and messengers between dimensions. Evolved human souls may work in partnership with these beings but maintain their distinct identity and evolutionary path. The scientific study of hierarchical systems in nature reveals that complex organization often emerges spontaneously, with different functional levels working in coordinated relationship. The distinction between souls and angels may represent a natural differentiation of function within the larger spiritual ecosystem, each with unique purposes that complement rather than compete with each other. For those of you who have lost elderly loved ones and wonder about their continuing journey, understand that death represents not an ending but a transition to expanded awareness and new forms of service. The love you shared has not diminished but rather exists now without the limitations imposed by physical form and circumstance. That love continues to be a bridge between worlds, a connection that transcends the apparent boundary between physical and non-physical existence. The most profound truth about elderly souls after transition may be that they become more authentically themselves, not less. The essence of identity, the unique pattern of consciousness that constitutes the individual, remains continuous while simultaneously expanding beyond previous limitations. Your grandmother is still your grandmother, with all the qualities and wisdom that made her relationship with you special, but she now perceives and operates from a broader perspective that includes but is not limited to that role. Many who receive communications from elderly loved ones after death report a sense of their continued interest and participation in family events, milestones, and challenges. They remain connected to the unfolding story of their families and communities, offering guidance, support, and sometimes protection during difficult passages. The reported appearances of deceased parents or grandparents during childbirth, health crises, or moments of danger suggest active, rather than passive attention to the lives of those they love. Scientific investigation into crisis apparitions, visual or sensory experiences of a distant person precisely at the moment of their death or when they are in danger, has documented thousands of cases where these perceptions later proved accurate despite no conventional way for the perceiver to have known about the crisis. These cases suggest consciousness can indeed project across distance and between dimensions, particularly when propelled by strong emotional connection. The elderly soul's relationship with its own previous attachments and identifications presents another fascinating aspect of this journey. During physical life, we naturally identify with our roles, accomplishments, possessions, and social position. After transition, these external markers fall away, revealing the essence beneath these temporary aspects of identity. This explains why communications from transition souls often reflect a shift in values and perspective, a recognition of what truly matters in the larger context of soul evolution. For the elderly soul that achieved significant status, wealth, or recognition during life, this liberation from external identity can be particularly profound. The CEO discovers that their true value had nothing to do with corporate achievement but rather with the quality of presence they brought to each interaction. The acclaimed artist realizes that each creative act was valuable not for the recognition it brought but for the love and truth it expressed. Psychological research into near-death experiences has documented this shift in values as one of the most consistent and lasting effects of the experience. Those who briefly perceive reality from beyond the physical perspective typically return with dramatically altered priorities, less concerned with status or accumulation, and more focused on love, authentic expression, and service. This suggests a glimpse of the perspective that becomes fully available to souls after complete transition. What about elderly souls who lived lives of quieter service, the grandmothers who nurtured families, the grandfathers who worked honestly without public recognition, the elders whose wisdom circulated only within their immediate communities? After transition, the true spiritual significance of these seemingly small lives often becomes apparent. The quality of presence, the consistency of love, and the integrity of daily choices reflect soul development more accurately than public achievement or recognition. Many wisdom traditions teach that the most advanced souls often live simple, unheralded lives, focusing on the quality of their consciousness rather than external impact. After transition, these quiet sages may emerge as significant teachers and guides in the spiritual realms, their wisdom finally recognized and received in its fullness. The relationship between elderly souls after transition and the cosmic plan of evolution represents perhaps the most expansive dimension of this journey. Many spiritual traditions teach that we are living in a time of accelerated development, a period when human consciousness is being prepared for collective advancement beyond current limitations. Transitioned souls, particularly those who developed significant wisdom during their physical lives, often participate actively in this evolutionary process. Contemporary accounts of spiritual guidance often include messages about humanity's current evolutionary threshold, the movement from separation consciousness into recognition of our fundamental interconnection with each other and with all life. Elderly souls who perceived glimmers of this unity consciousness during their physical lives may become important guides for this transition after their physical death, working to awaken similar recognition in those still incarnate. Scientific research into collective consciousness effects, studies showing that large groups practicing meditation or prayer can measurably affect social indicators like crime rates or hospital admissions, suggests mechanisms through which non-physical consciousness might influence the physical world. These field effects may represent one way that transitioned souls participate in guiding collective human development. For those of you watching who have lost elderly loved ones, I invite you to consider a practice of conscious communication, not through mediumship or complex ritual, but through the simple quality of your attention and intention. Create a quiet space, bring your loved one to mind, and speak to them as naturally as you would in physical conversation. Then allow yourself to rest in receptive silence, noticing any subtle impressions, feelings, or knowings that arise in response. This practice honors the ongoing relationship without demanding dramatic evidence or phenomena. Over time, you may discover patterns of response unique to your connection, perhaps certain symbols that appear, dreams that carry a distinctive quality, or synchronicities that occur in meaningful relationship to your communication. Trust your own experience rather than comparing it to others' accounts or expectations. Scientific studies of grief have documented that maintaining an inner relationship with deceased loved ones can support healthy integration of loss. Unlike older models that emphasized letting go as the goal of grief work, contemporary approaches recognize that continuing bonds can provide comfort, guidance, and a sense of ongoing connection that honors rather than denies the reality of enduring love. As we approach the conclusion of this exploration, I invite you to consider how understanding the truth about elderly souls after transition might transform your relationship with aging, death, and loss. When we recognize that physical death represents not an ending but a transition to expanded awareness and new forms of service, we can approach our own aging process with greater peace and our losses with greater trust in the underlying design. The scientific frontier of consciousness research is gradually validating aspects of this ancient wisdom, creating bridges between empirical investigation and spiritual understanding. As quantum physics continues to reveal the observer-dependent nature of reality, as neuroscience documents the limits of brain-based explanations for consciousness, and as systematic study of transpersonal experiences yields consistent patterns across cultures and contexts, we move toward an integrated wisdom that honors both the objective and the subjective dimensions of human experience. For elderly souls who have completed their physical journey, the transition we call death represents not a diminishment but an expansion, a return to their more comprehensive identity with the wisdom of physical experience integrated into their continuing evolution. They remain connected to those they have loved, continue to grow and serve according to their unique capacities, and participate in the unfolding cosmic design with greater clarity and purpose than was possible within the limitations of physical form. If you have found resonance with this exploration of the soul's journey beyond physical existence, I invite you to subscribe to this channel. We are here to reawaken the ancient wisdom that resides within each of us, the knowing that transcends intellectual understanding and touches the eternal aspect of our being. The journey always begins within, in that quiet center where wisdom whispers beneath the noise of conventional thinking. Until we meet again, whether in this dimension or another, may you walk in the awareness that love transcends all apparent boundaries, that wisdom grows through every experience embraced with consciousness, and that your own being extends far beyond the temporary form through which you currently express. Peace be with you, fellow travelers on the cosmic journey.